Hello, friends. Hello, everyone, far flung friends. Um, I was sad when I learned that this was going to be a virtual reading. When I was first invited, I just thought, oh, great, I'll go to Philadelphia and I'll read in this beautiful library. Um, I'm so grateful to be in that space. And when I learned that, that it was a virtual reading, I first felt sad because I was missing this opportunity to be in the same room with people, pushing the same air back and forth between us. And that sadness, when I started realizing that it was a virtual event, that sadness gave way to a kind of strangeness, this streaming strangeness that we're sitting in the middle of right now. This very, for me, odd. You guys maybe are all used to it, but for me, it's a very odd arrival together across the strait, like these immense distances. I look at my screen here, and I have a friend in Santiago. I have a friend in Alaska, a friend in Minneapolis, in Atlanta, and Vermont, and then some from down the road here in Brooklyn, and new friends in Philadelphia. And I was thinking about the way in which this streaming strangeness is a kind of poem, in that it crosses and closes such great distances between us. And like a poem, at times it makes those distances maybe a little bit warmer. So I hope, well, I know that Lisa did this already, but I hope I can continue to make that strangeness a little bit warm. And I've picked for the occasion some poems that, is it right to say they're about, or they are of, maybe, occasions of astonishing arrivals or bewildering encounters in some way. And the first poem I'm going to read is about hearing news, a particular kind of news about the imminent arrival of a child. So this is a poem written on the occasion of my wife and I learning from an ultrasound technician that our baby boy, who we knew that he was on his way, but we learned on this occasion that he could hear our voices. And the poem starts with a rather disturbing first line, perhaps. My little Columbus, adrift at sea in utero, you're already reaching for worlds to come. Tracing the screen, more inkblot than portrait, we draw what is from what is shadow. Lima bean, hawkbeak, bowsprit, it's you, steering to face what booms across your Indian Ocean. A distant-storied man on distant-storied land, shouldn't I open with some cute synecdoche, more peaceable, less maniacal? The spirit invoked homes to only gilded horizons. Shouldn't I, soften what I shape by shifting sounds? Who would dare? Pilgrim, distant listener, be it me or be it thunder, you hear beasts of unknown order. Savage to you, I hesitate in this thicketed wood. I step out to meet you, to sound on the shore for which you are bound. Please land gently and listen and listen and listen and stay. So maybe that poem's to you, to Columbus. I don't mean to call you Columbus. I'm sorry about that. But we're all arriving here on the shore together. The second poem I'm going to read was born of a YouTube video. There's a YouTube video called the Exploding Whale Video. It's actually a TV news clip from decades ago, a report from Florence, Oregon, where a big whale had washed ashore and was dead, and it began decomposing and smelling terrible. And the local village, the villagers and the authorities tried to dispose of the whale, but in a very peculiar and rather dangerous way. The poem has an epigraph from the video from the newsman. And the epigraph is, "The blast blasted blubber beyond all believable bounds." The poem is titled "The Crucifixion." What now? In a 45-foot, 8-ton mound, the dead sperm whale washed a question ashore. Once given, how do you go about giving God back? So isn't it shameful that we, still unknowing, will answer with dynamite? Monkish distraction, this quick digging the pits beneath the enormous bearded flank, handkerchiefs guarding our faces from the real work at hand, which is looking, isn't it? A difficult looking at slipping away, an end larger than ours, decay. That's the task we all return to, however briefly, when the easier business of shovels is done. Backs on dunes, sandwiches on our sandy laps, we try to watch the blubbered haul go on not moving. There's not much to see. Early clouds, the size of countries, ride over us and slip off unrememberable. New questions flock. Spirals of terns and gulls collapse from the sky to pick at the carcass staunch as a church. A God has come. What will make it matter? Fire, nails, camera, action. As if we make the unimaginable more. We plant the charge. We run the cables. I wish I could hear you. Just at least you're breathing. It's a very quiet space. The Muse. Today, shopping for fish at the Piggly Wiggly, I met for the first time a woman of my grandmother's generation, Mrs. Otto, who by some unlikely coincidence, had read a few of my poems. She wasn't impressed. But before our introductions, in the great tabernacle quiet that is the smallest supermarket, she and I stood a while quite close. Her ear leveled at my elbow, we bellied up to a freezer chest, together looking down upon the spread of salmon fillets. What an orderly corner of the world we saw. 5 rectangles of tangerine flesh, vacuumed under cellophane in styrofoam boats. Immaculate. Well, no. I came to see one cut was blemished slightly. A black hole puncture on this portion of flesh. The wound arrayed in a bruise gaining ground unseen, putting out purple ring, purple ring. Mrs. Otto looked too, yet strangers as ever before, neither she nor I would know how fine a thing this was, so still between us. Oh, this fish, a part of salmon, bears such little resemblance to the same named creature that spirits northwestern rivers. This body netted, penned, hosed, thrown, bludgeoned, flayed, quartered, boarded, wrapped, and frozen, then laid before us inside out, that now we might glimpse, it seems, by what it lacks so profoundly, yet precisely, its divinity. Then she said, "Hello, excuse me, don't I know you?" and asked for my name. The name I gave, the sound I carry, sounded different than it had before. In its 6-syllable wake, I watched her rise before me, heightened by new posture, the look of a lone barn, dark windowed, splinter boarded, holding and holding in prairie land wind. With her hand still held in mine, she delivered this sentence. "I can't help but notice, Mr. Carelli, the Lord has never appeared in any of your poems." With that, Mrs. Otto turned away, allowing me but a single frame of silhouette as she paused, wholly unhurried, to bow before the freezer, to catch a piece of fish, to lift it up. And being held there herself, fluorescent, in these every morning waters that are felt, passed through, and never known, she picked of the 5 to take and to eat the rotten one, the flesh most dead. How strange. I probably should have said thank you, but then she left me, shepherding her squeaky cart to the end of the line, where a poem extends a broken silence, where faith resounds and finds no end, where between myself and Mrs. Otto, a word I thought I knew was lost. I'm about to read a very wild poem about a very strange, maybe mythic encounter, but with a poet who, as far as I knew, was dead. He's a Russian poet named Osip Mandel. And Osip Mandel is one of the great wonders of of all time, but certainly of the 20th century. He's this wild Russian poet who walked his way through the darkest, most disturbing periods in the 20th century in Russia, got in the worst kind of troubles with his poems, worst kind of troubles with Joseph Stalin, ended up being exiled multiple times, and ultimately he was last seen, there's last record of him in some concentration camp in a very remote place. But I recently, a couple years ago, was with my friend Sarah, and I was trying to remember an Osip Mandelstam line, and I misremembered it, which I probably mostly do when I'm trying to remember the line of a poem, but I misremembered this line, and in a way that led to Osip Mandelstam appearing on the street with us that day. So this poem is a whirlwind with lots of visions. A lot of the images and lines in this poem are born of Osip Mandelstam's poems, because they're all coming out of that misremembering and trying to remember, and then all of this comes to the mind in ways that you'll see the poem doesn't quite make sense of, but there's a vision of the lovely man himself in the midst of it. So the poem is titled Osip in August, and it's for my friend Sarah. There was Osip, as there was a photograph I lost. I remember better now. As there is a bird and a wolf and a black foil path running back to old songs. As those songs that even the song or the singer never heard, I remember. As while out on coffee break this morning, we saw the poet Mandelstam and didn't skip a beat. There was Osip, older than he ever lived to be, staring at his hands held up cupping sunlight. As one happens to know, though the world disconforms to the poem, the poet's arrival is perfectly natural, even inevitable, so holy that we barely notice. As an iced latte is just so delicious. As only later, as these appearances germinate, I begin to see what I saw. As only later, let me regroup. This poem carries me away. There was Osip, older than he ever lived to be, staring at his hands held up cupping sunlight. As one happens to know, though the world disconforms to the poem, the poet's arrival is perfectly natural, even inevitable, so wholly so that we barely notice. As an iced latte is just so delicious. As only later, as these appearances germinate, I begin to see what I saw, as I recall the geometer of empty Arabian sands, as I hear the train's whistle in prescient whispers of a Primus stove, as I see the great mustache, as I'm astonished to see Osip older, balder, shorter than one judges from the last photo. As outside cafe regular, he stood statue still on the sidewalk, paying no heed as we passed with our coffees in hand. As one click earlier, awaiting our lattes, I'd misremembered and so had misquoted, and then I corrected, or so I thought, one of Osip's exquisite lines. It was sound, I said, not light pouring into the fingers of mortals. But I, Osip wrote, I've forgotten what I wanted to say. My friend, did you notice the old man praying in the street? As the moment remembers me reciprocally, I remember the hand made of worms in the arms of a clock face turning in a treetop. I recall that at the end of December 1938, at an uncertain hour, Mandelstam dies. The poet skips off where a chance path of junk boats aligned just this once in the mist. I recall these facts have arisen from a fiction. As the photo I remember is the path curving back to silver songs. As there's that tiny double portrait of the poet, one front facing and the second shot in profile, images I lifted today from the curb where they drop like sparrow wings, separate and askew. Who drops them? What brother of Osip has just passed by? As the ages rush around in their infinite uniforms, no two the same, I return to Moscow, quiet as a coffin. As Osip's woolen suit is too heavy for the season, how his sleeves were striped in sweat and wrinkled like sun-ruined skin, as I remember his hands held up to his chin, up and palms together, as he bows in close to the pages, as if his verses have been puzzled by time, transmogrified to tongues like English, wholly unknown to the poet. As he bows in close to the pages, it's appropriate. As he bows in close to his pages, as if his verses have been puzzled by time, transmogrified to tongues like English, wholly unknown to the poet. As like death in time, the portraits become irresistible, as half of Osip's feathers are broken or missing, as the poor man's feathers are broken or missing, and thereafter the story is born. As even across 80 winters in one glance, you've recited the story in full, and the image itself is somehow now soothed for the moment, as a lost child held by a stranger in the crowd. As already a nomad, or exile rather, he's banished to the east, then re-banished further. As in Vladivostok, in the midway of his life, he dies of ice and failure, or so the story goes. As in the last photograph, he appears much older than a man of 47, though not half as old as he appears today. But I, Osip writes, I've forgotten what I wanted to say. As this was Osip in 2020, when our cold drinks appeared on the counter and we carried them out. As we entered the painted, unparticular fortress of that Brooklyn street, overdomed by London plane trees, bastioned by ivied townhouses, and busy only with the tow-headed kiddos who flash downhill on their scooters. And there was the pilgrim, and there was a bird and a wolf and a stone. As here's the poem. It's the ruins, not the fortress, we recall and recite. Not the fortress, but the stones we trip over on land we mistook for untouched. That here the earth spits up time's architecture, the stone footings of our proper sorrow. Here are the holes in the hands that we build, and we build to forget what's lost. That was Osip we circled, so as not to awaken a man so enthralled. That was Osip as we parted and swallowed the seas to the left and right of his body. That was Osip recalled by misremembered verses. That the bird and the wolf are still here, patient in the roar of the moment. And that it is sound, finally, not light, pouring into his fingers. It is sound, not light, pouring into our fingers. That it's the songbird elegizing Osip today. And that it is us, friend, stepping these immortal steps away. I remember better now. One poem left. Thank you all. In this great silence, making your wonderful noises wherever you are in your lives. I wish I could hear you. The new world. It's true. Pilgrim. For you, it may be that nothing happens anymore. That life is this, going on all around you all the time and nothing else. That this land is blank land. This land is blank land from California to the unnamed island. That from an Apollo staircase you may leap each morning, a moonwalker, to discover the plains of Kansas at last devoid of evil men. That hallelujah now the cavalry may ride at your command, crusading backward through memory, their sword blades trued with all we know now, but couldn't know then. That your war horse's hammering head hits the source. That who, you rightly ask, who are the savages now? And true it may be that the whole of your light shines forth in this darkening sky, the heaven between the dot that ends this sentence and a great cross heralding the next. That the infinitesimal is your new glory, and that indeed there is glory in a certain kind of small. That in the long night within your bones there hangs the shard of a crescent moon. That we awaken, who, every morning in a tome of tomes of tomes. That the great star's immense burning, so faintly printed on a noontime flag, reminds us all that it is so. That grace may await you nonetheless, pilgrim. That in this in-between breath, you may find your rightful home in these stories that no one remembers, that without you, no one knows. Thank you all so much.